Hello and welcome to the Cyber Den, your weekly dose of tech and games. I, Jake, will be chatting with professional composer Gareth Coker, better known as the soundtrack composer for the side-scrolling video game Ori and the Blind Forest. Thanks for coming, mate.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Now, Gareth, please tell us what got you into composing soundtracks.
Well, originally, I basically found out that it was the only thing that I might actually be really good at. So when I started doing music, I was a pretty decent piano player, but then I went to music school and discovered that everyone was better than me at piano. So I was like, maybe I should do composing instead. And I've managed to make that last a bit longer. Now, as for getting into soundtracks, honestly, I feel like I've just been in the right place at the right time. For example, on Ori, I literally got emailed out of the blue because my music was found on a very small, obscure part of the internet known as ModDB. Maybe it's not that small and obscure, but in the grand scheme of things, it is. And the director, Thomas Mahler, emailed me out of the blue and said, would you like to do the music for the prototype of Ori? And I got an early build of the game and said yes. So that's like an example of how I got into Ori.
Where is it that you get your inspiration from when you compose? Are there any particular composers or musicians out there who have inspired your choices?
Well, the first piece of sheet music that I ever got was the Forrest Gump main theme by Alan Silvestri. It's the theme that plays when the feather is flying for the opening credits of the screen. It's a little bit cheesy, but it fits the movie perfectly well. It was just one of the first pieces of music I really connected with. Later on, I became more inspired by the music of Tom Newman, who did the music for Wall-E and Finding Nemo. And in terms of games, probably my strongest memory from my childhood is playing Final Fantasy VII and kind of being blown away by the emotional weight of that music, especially given that they weren't using live orchestras or anything like that. And they were still able to get an emotional quality in the music without having real players, which was quite remarkable.
Let's talk about your latest soundtrack for the acclaimed award-winning video game Ori and the Blind Forest. Now, what were your inspirations and aims for the soundtrack specifically, and what was the development process for each track like?
Well, this is kind of a tricky one because I've been working on the game for 4 years, which sounds like an incredibly long time. Now, I wasn't working full-time on the game, but Moon Studios, the developer, gave me access to the game very early on, so it allowed me to get a feel for Ori's movement. And then as the artwork came in, I got to see it a lot sooner than I would if I was doing the music in a traditional way. Usually the composer comes in near the end of the product's development cycle and has to cram as much music as they possibly can into like the last 3 months. That was not the case for Ori. So early on, I think the influences for the game's music matched the influences for the visuals, which were from a lot of Studio Ghibli films. So like soundtrack for Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away. We also used a couple of tracks as references from some of Tom Newman's scores, like Wall-E and Finding Nemo, which I've already mentioned, and James Newton Howard, who did the music for all of M. Night Shyamalan's movies, like The Sixth Sense and The Village. The Village in particular has a fantastic evocative soundtrack. what we were looking to do for the game, we wanted the music to take the big picture view and for the sound effects to take the small picture view. So the sound effects are really bringing you in to exactly what Ori is doing. So, for example, we don't have any percussion in the music because the sound effects are the percussion, which makes my job easier because it's like a whole section of the orchestra I don't have to worry about. And then the music, it's more like a backdrop to everything that is going on in screen. And that's something that I think we're quite proud of, is how the music and sound combine together and don't really get in the way of each other.
Now, on a personal note, what are your favourite soundtracks in video games, and what soundtracks that you have composed are your fondest?
That is a tricky question because there are just I'm a gamer, so I've played a lot of video games. But one that jumps out to me in particular, forgive the pun about jumping out, but Dead Space is one of my favorites. It just has a superbly creepy score, especially for the opening 4 to 5 hours of the game, which are wonderfully scripted. Another one, which is for a very underrated game, I think, is the score for Remember Me by Olivier de Rivière. That score combines a full symphonic orchestra with weird electronic glitch effects. I strongly encourage everyone to listen to it because I guarantee you'll have heard nothing like it before. In terms of stuff that I've done myself, Ori's the biggest project I've done, and each track is kind of like one of my babies. But if I had to pick one from the soundtrack, it's the track called Completing the Circle, and this cue plays when Ori gets his final core ability. Ori has 8 core abilities in the game that he has to pick up, and this music cue plays when he gets the last one, and it's kind of quite an epic version of the main theme. It's quite an uplifting one, and Ori's quite a depressing game overall, so this is a nice contrast for the player when they hear it, and it was a fun one for me to write.
Gareth, thank you very much for coming to this interview on Siren FM 107.3.
Thanks very much again for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
And I'd like to thank my dear listeners out there for once again tuning into this great interview here on the Cyber Den, your weekly dose of tech and games. This is Jake signing off. See you later, Gareth.
See you. Thanks.